Supreme Commander Razak Tull stood on the command deck of the Vorsian flagship Inevitable Conquest, his forearms crossed in various postures of impatience. The massive viewscreen before him displayed the unremarkable blue-green sphere of Helios 7, a frontier planet that, quite frankly, wouldn't have merited a second glance if not for the human infestation currently occupying its surface. Remind me again why we're wasting a battle fleet on this mudball. Razak growled, his upper right hand gesturing dismissively at the planet. His scaled skin glistened under the ambient lighting, shifting from deep purple to a shade of annoyed crimson. Fleet Admiral Enix Parvo approached with careful deference, her single-head crest displaying submissive blue patterns. Supreme Commander, the Emperor himself has designated Helios 7 as strategically valuable due to its position near the quantum fold junction. The humans have established what they call an outpost there, though our intelligence suggests it's barely more than a scientific research station. Razak's secondary breathing sacs inflated with a hiss that passed for Vorsian laughter. An outpost? You mean a pre-packaged surrender? He barked a series of commands to his bridge crew. Tactical display. The viewscreen shifted to show a holographic representation of the Vorsian Armada, 16 warships of various classes, over 200 fighter craft, and enough firepower to reduce the planet's crust to slag if necessary. Compared to that, the human presence was represented by a single blinking dot. This is their defense? One installation? Razak's tone dripped with what humans might recognize as sarcasm if they could decipher Vorsian vocal patterns. The storied humans who supposedly sent the Xerillian hordes packing? I expected more. Sir, ventured his intelligence officer, Kree Baz, a slender Vorsian with unusually large optical organs, I feel compelled to note that our information on human military capabilities is incomplete. The Xerillian incident was never fully documented, and there are reports that— Spare me your cautionary tales, Kree, Razak interrupted, his secondary arms unfolding to tap aggressively at the tactical console. I've studied the humans. Soft-skinned, single-hearted weaklings who require constant atmospheric adjustments just to survive. Their only advantage is their unpredictability, which is merely a fancy way of saying they don't follow proper military doctrine. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances, a universal constant across sentient species. We have overwhelming superiority, Razak continued, warming to his subject. Our technology outclasses theirs by at least 3 developmental stages. Our warriors are bred for combat across 12 generations. And most importantly, we have surprise on our side. They don't even know we're here. As if to contradict him, a communication alert chimed across the bridge. Incoming transmission, announced the communications officer, her voice tinged with surprise. From the surface. It's in perfect standard Vorsian. Razak's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion among his kind. That's impossible. Put it through. The viewscreen flickered, revealing the face of a human female. Her skin was dark, her head adorned with what appeared to be decorative fibers pulled back tightly. Most disturbing were her eyes. They held amusement. Greetings, Supreme Commander Razak Tull of the Vorsian Empire, the human said, her pronunciation unnervingly flawless. I am Commander Eleanor Price of the Terran Defensive Alliance. Welcome to Helios 7. I trust your journey through the quantum fold was uneventful? What? Silence fell across the bridge. Razak's scales flushed a deep, angry red. How do you know who I am? He demanded, abandoning protocol in his shock. The human's face displayed that bizarre stretching of facial muscles that humans called a smile. Oh, we know many things, Commander, including the fact that you're here to what was the phrase in your battle plan. Ah, yes, cleanse the human vermin from this strategically valuable world. Razak turned a murderous glare toward his intelligence officer, who seemed to be trying to physically shrink into his station. Since you're here, continued the human with infuriating calm, I assume formal hostilities are about to commence. As per Section 7 of the Galactic Conventions, I request the customary 24-hour preparation period before your attack begins. Razak's mouth split into what passed for a Vorsian grin. These humans and their obsession with rules and fairness. Such weakness. Granted, he said magnanimously. 24 hours, starting now. I suggest you use it to prepare your surrender terms. How thoughtful, replied Commander Price. I'll see you in 24 hours then, or sooner, perhaps. The transmission cut abruptly. Razak turned to his assembled officers, his posture radiating confidence. Begin the countdown, he ordered. In one rotation of this pitiful planet, we will demonstrate why the Vorsian Empire has dominated this sector for 10,000 years. Fleet Admiral Nix approached cautiously. Sir, if I may, how did they know we were coming? Razak waved a dismissive hand. A lucky guess. Or perhaps a spy in our midst who will soon be identified and eviscerated. It changes nothing. They have one installation against our fleet. No reinforcements can reach them in time. Their knowledge of our presence merely means they'll have time to appreciate the inevitability of their defeat. He settled into his command throne, all four of his arms arranging themselves in a pose of supreme confidence. Let the countdown begin, he repeated. This will be the easiest conquest in Imperial history. If only he knew how wrong he was. Let's make this official, Razak declared, his voice booming across the command deck. Prepare a formal ultimatum. I want it dripping with such intimidating diplomatic language that these humans will be packing their belongings before we finish transmitting. The communications officer tapped frantically at her console, prepared to record, Supreme Commander. Razak straightened his ceremonial armor and fixed his four eyes on the recording drone. His scales shifted to the deep imperial purple that signified authority in Vorsian culture. Commander Eleanor Price of the so-called Terran Defensive Alliance. I, Supreme Commander Razak Tull, authorized representative of His Eternal Magnificence Emperor Zol Vantax XVIII. Hereby inform you that the planet designated Helios 7 lies within the rightful expansion zone of the Vorsian Empire. Your presence constitutes an illegal occupation of imperial territory. He paused for dramatic effect, his secondary arms spreading wide in a gesture that Vorsian cultural experts considered the height of intimidating body language. As a courtesy extended only to potentially civilized species, I officially grant you 24 standard hours to surrender your installation, remove all personnel, and depart from this system. Failure to comply will result in the immediate deployment of the 16th Imperial Battle Fleet against your position, with no quarter given. Razak leaned closer to the drone, his voice dropping to what he considered an ominous whisper. I have 16 warships, Commander Price. 16 against your one pitiful outpost. The mathematics of your situation should be obvious, even to a human. 24 hours. Choose wisely. He made the traditional Vorsian gesture of finality, all four hands clenched simultaneously, and the recording ended. Transmit immediately, he ordered. As the message was sent, Fleet Tactician Jex Naroon approached the command throne. Unlike most Vorsians, Jex was short and compactly built, with an unusual grayish tint to his scales that matched his pragmatic personality. Supreme Commander, may I speak freely? Jex asked, his head crest flat against his skull in the appropriate display of respect. Always, old friend, Razak replied, his scales relaxing into a more casual purple blue. Your caution has saved my hide more than once. I've been studying the human historical records we captured from their colony on Proxima B, Jex said, his voice low enough that only Razak could hear. They have a peculiar trait. When cornered, they don't behave rationally. Razak snorted. You mean they don't surrender when they should? That's not a trait, Jex, that's a defect. Perhaps, Jex continued, but there's more. They have this concept they call last stands, where they fight with increased effectiveness despite certain defeat. And this Commander Price, she has a record. The skirmish at Arcturus Prime. The defense of New Montana Colony. Minor victories against disorganized pirate bands, Razak dismissed with a wave of his upper left hand. It's not the same as facing the Imperial fleet. The view screen flickered again. Incoming response, Supreme Commander, announced the communications officer. The human commander's face appeared, still wearing that disturbing smile. "Thank you for your generous ultimatum, Supreme Commander Razak," she said. "I accept your 24-hour courtesy period and will use it to prepare. Not my surrender, of course, but something I think you'll find quite educational." The transmission ended abruptly. Razak laughed, a harsh sound that made junior officers flinch. Such bravado. "Prepare a boarding party. I want that human brought to me alive when this is over. I'll keep her as a curiosity." Jex Naroon said nothing, but his scales had shifted to the gray-green hue of deep concern, a color Razak had learned long ago to take seriously. "Stop fretting, old friend," Razak said, clapping Jex on the shoulder with his lower right hand. "What can one human possibly do in 24 hours? The question hung in the air, unanswered. "Supreme Commander, we have a situation?" Razak turned from his tactical display with an irritated flick of his head crest. Barely 1 hour had passed since the ultimatum, and already his officers were interrupting his victory planning. "What is it, Lieutenant?" he demanded, not bothering to recall the junior communications officer's name. The young Vorsian's scales flickered nervously between green and yellow. "Sir, we're experiencing a communications blackout across all non-essential channels. Long-range communications with Imperial Command are completely severed, and intership communications are degrading rapidly." Razak waved a dismissive hand. "Helios 7's sun is a Class G variable star, likely just a solar flare causing interference. Hardly worth my attention." "That was our initial assessment too, sir," the lieutenant pressed on, showing unusual courage. "But the interference pattern doesn't match typical solar activity. It's targeted, somehow, only affecting our systems." That got Razak's attention. All 4 of his eyes focused sharply on the lieutenant. "Explain." "Meh." Fleet Tactician Jex Naroon stepped forward, datapad in hand. "We've confirmed that our communication satellites are experiencing the blackout. But we're still detecting clear transmissions between the human outpost and their orbiting relay stations. Whatever's causing our communications failure isn't affecting theirs." Razak's upper arms crossed in thought. A coincidence. Their communication technology must operate on different frequencies. "All frequencies are affected on our end, sir," Jex replied quietly. "And the blackout began precisely 57 minutes after we delivered our ultimatum." The command deck fell silent. "Are you suggesting," Razak said slowly, his scales darkening, "that a single human outpost has somehow disabled communications across 16 Imperial warships? Preposterous." "I suggest nothing, Supreme Commander," Jex said carefully. "I merely report facts. The humans are communicating freely. We are not." Razak stormed to the primary communications console, shoving aside the technician, to send a message to the unflinching dominance. "Now?" The technician worked frantically for several minutes while Razak loomed over her. "I've established a narrow-band connection, sir," she finally announced. "Audio only, severely degraded." "Captain Dreas, can you hear me?" Razak barked into the comm. A staticky voice responded, broken by bursts of white noise. "Supreme Comm static experiencing unusual static systems, failing static unknown tech static." The connection died with a sharp whine that made several officers flinch. "Get it back," Razak demanded. "Impossible, sir." The technician responded, her scales pale with stress. "Something is actively jamming our transmissions now. This isn't passive interference." Razak turned to Kree Baz, his intelligence officer. "What do we know about human jamming technology?" Kree looked distinctly uncomfortable. "According to our intelligence, They shouldn't have any capabilities that could affect our advanced systems. Our communication encryption and frequency hopping algorithms are generations beyond their technology. Well, they're doing something, Razak roared, his temper flaring as hot as his now crimson scales. At that moment, the main view screen activated independently. Commander Eleanor Price's face appeared, looking remarkably relaxed. "Having some communication difficulties, Supreme Commander?" she asked pleasantly. "So sorry to hear that. Must be those pesky solar flares you mentioned to your crew." Razak's membrane lids narrowed over his 4 eyes. "How did you?" "Oh, we can hear everything you're saying," Price interrupted with a casual wave of her hand. "Your encryption wasn't that difficult to crack. Talented people, my team. They've had a whole hour to work, after all." The casual revelation sent a ripple of alarm through the command deck. Officers exchanged worried glances, scales shifting to anxious hues. "Whatever primitive jamming technology you're employing, it won't save you," Razak growled, trying to regain his composure. "We can still destroy your outpost without communicating with each other." Price smiled that unnerving human smile again. "You could certainly try. But then you'd miss all the interesting developments of the next few hours. By the way, you might want to check on your perimeter scout ships. Haven't heard from them in a while, have you?" The transmission cut out abruptly. "Status of scout vessels," Razak ordered immediately. The tactical officer worked frantically at his station. "No response from any of the 6 scout ships, sir. Last automated telemetry received 20 minutes ago." A cold sensation, something Razak had rarely experienced, crept along his spine. 6 ships, silent, without a distress call. "Launch fighters for visual confirmation of scout ship status," he ordered, his voice carefully controlled. For the first time since entering the Helios 7 system, Supreme Commander Razak Tull felt the faintest twinge of doubt. The fighter pilots returned with news that turned the atmosphere on the command deck from concern to grim. 2 scout ships completely destroyed, Supreme Commander, reported the lead pilot, her scales a sickly yellow-green. "The other 4 have been disabled, power systems offline, crews alive but unable to restore functionality. They report some kind of directed energy weapon struck without warning. No conventional damage, just everything electronic stopped working." Razak paced the command deck, all 4 arms clasped behind his back. "EMP weapons? That's ancient technology. Our ships have shielding against such primitive attacks." "These weren't conventional EMPs, sir," the pilot continued. "The affected areas were surgically precise. Only critical systems targeted. Our engineers have never seen anything like it." Before Razak could respond, the sensor officer called out urgently, "Supreme Commander, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the surface." The main view screen shifted to show a topographical map of the area surrounding the human outpost. What had appeared to be natural rock formations were now lighting up with energy readings. "What am I looking at?" Razak demanded. Baz, the intelligence officer, stared at the readings with all 4 eyes widened in shock. "Sir, those are defense installations, heavily camouflaged. They weren't there in our initial scans." "Of course they were there," Razak snapped. "Your intelligence was flawed." "No, sir," Kree insisted, his voice unusually firm. "Our initial planetary scans were thorough. These installations either materialized within the last hour or they were there all along, hidden somehow," finished Jex Naroon, who had been silently observing. "The humans have some kind of cloaking technology we haven't encountered before." Razak stared at the screen, watching as more and more energy signatures appeared, spreading beyond the outpost's supposed boundaries. What they had identified as a single installation was revealing itself to be a sprawling complex of underground structures and disguised weapon emplacements. "How many?" he asked, his voice unnaturally quiet. 47 distinct energy signatures so far, sir," replied the sensor officer. still growing. Power output levels suggest defensive capabilities far beyond what any human outpost should possess. Razak slammed a fist onto the nearest console. This is impossible. Our intelligence indicated this was a research outpost with minimal defenses. A single human commander with a skeleton crew. It appears, Jex said carefully, that the humans wanted us to believe exactly that. The tactical display updated in real time, the supposed outpost now revealed as a heavily fortified military installation at least 3 times larger than their initial estimates. Launch surveillance drones, Razak ordered. I want visual confirmation of every one of those energy signatures. Launching now, sir, the drone operator confirmed, deploying standard surveillance pattern. For several tense minutes, the command deck watched as the small, stealthy drones approached the planet's atmosphere. First drones entering upper atmosphere now, reported the operator. Suddenly, the tactical display lit up with warning signals. One by one, the drone indicators winked out. What's happening? Razak demanded. The drones are being neutralized, sir, the operator reported, her voice rising in pitch. Some kind of automated point defense system. 90% of the drones eliminated already. That's impossible, Razak said, but his protest sounded hollow even to his own hearing orifices. Those drones are designed to be virtually undetectable. Not to whatever the humans are using, said Jex. They're being picked off with precision. As the last drone indicators vanished from the display, a hush fell over the command deck. The silence was broken by an incoming transmission. Commander Price's face appeared on screen, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a team of humans in military uniforms, working busily at various stations. I see you've discovered some of our little surprises, Supreme Commander, Price said cheerfully. I hope you don't mind that we've been doing a bit of redecorating while you were busy losing your scout ships and drones. One of the humans behind her leaned over and whispered something in her ear. Ah, wonderful timing, Price continued. My team informs me that all of our defense grids are now fully operational. I do hope you're recording all this. It would make an excellent tactical study for your empire on why proper intelligence gathering is so important before an invasion. Razak's scales had gone nearly black with rage. You deceived us deliberately. Price's expression shifted to one of mock surprise. Of course we did. It's called strategy, Commander. Did you really think we'd broadcast our true capabilities? We've been preparing for the Vorsian Empire for years. You're just the first ones arrogant enough to actually take the bait. The transmission ended, leaving Razak staring at his own reflection in the darkened view screen. Captain Azul Vex, commander of the flagship's marine contingent, approached cautiously. Orders, Supreme Commander? Should we prepare landing parties for a ground assault? Razak noticed something disturbing. The proud, aggressive Vorsian Marines bred for generations to fear nothing were showing signs of anxiety, scales shifting color involuntarily, secondary breathing sacs inflating more rapidly than normal. Weapons clutched just a little too tightly. No, he said finally, no ground assault. Not until we understand what we're facing. Jex Naroon approached with a data tablet. Sir, energy readings continue to increase. Whatever they're powering up down there, it's substantial. Razak stared at the readouts, a cold feeling settling in his gut. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Maintain distance, he ordered. All ships to defensive formation Delta. Prepare for possible hostile action. As the orders went out across the fleet through old-fashioned visual signaling, now that communications remained compromised, Supreme Commander Razak Tull faced an uncomfortable realization. The humans had been several steps ahead of him from the beginning. And they still had 22 hours left to prepare. Supreme Commander. Multiple objects launching from the surface. Razak spun toward the sensor station, where the young officer's scales were flashing in alarm patterns. The tactical display showed dozens, no, hundreds of small objects rising from Helios 7's surface, arranging themselves into geometric formations as they ascended through the atmosphere. Classification? Razak demanded, striding to the station. Unknown, sir, replied the officer, fingers flying across the controls. Size consistent with single-pilot fighters, but no life signs detected. No conventional propulsion signatures either. Jex Naroon studied the readings over the officer's shoulder, his expression grim. They're drones. Automated combat units. How many? Razak asked, dreading the answer. Current count is 300 and rising, sir. A shocked murmur ran through the command deck. Even for a major Imperial battle group, coordinating more than 100 fighter craft was a logistical challenge. 300 autonomous units operating in perfect synchronization was unheard of. Defensive formation. Razak barked. All ships, power to shields, fighters to intercept pattern Gamma 6. The Vorsian fleet moved with practiced precision, the 16 warships arranging themselves into a three-dimensional defensive sphere. Fighter craft poured from launch bays, their pilots the pride of the Empire confident in their superior training and technology. Sir, called out the communications officer, we've re-established limited fleet communications through tight beam lasers. All captains acknowledged defensive orders. Finally, some good news. Razak felt a surge of confidence. Whatever these human drones were, they would soon face the full might of Vorsian military prowess. The first wave of Imperial fighters engaged the incoming drones at the outer defense perimeter. The command deck watched through the fighter pilots' visual feeds as they closed on their targets. Those aren't like any human craft I've ever seen, muttered Baz, studying the imagery. The drones were sleek, black, with no visible weapons or propulsion systems, just smooth, reflective surfaces that seemed to absorb sensor scans rather than reflect them. The lead Vorsian pilot's voice came through the comms, tight with anticipation. Target lock failed. Switching to manual targeting. Firing. Streams of plasma fire erupted from the Imperial fighters, streaking toward the drone formation. What happened next sent a chill through every Vorsian on the command deck. The drones didn't evade. They didn't return fire. They simply altered. The plasma bolts passed through suddenly insubstantial forms that rippled like liquid and then reconstituted. What in the name of the Emperor? Gasped the weapons officer. Some kind of adaptive phase-shifting technology, Jex said, his voice hushed with unwilling admiration. They're changing their molecular density to allow energy weapons to pass through harmlessly. Before the Vorsian pilots could adjust their tactics, the drones accelerated with impossible speed, not toward the fighters, but directly toward the capital ships. All vessels, evasive maneuvers, Razak ordered, but it was already too late. The drones swarmed around the Imperial warships. They didn't fire weapons or attempt to breach hulls. Instead, they attached themselves to specific points on each vessel's exterior power nodes, sensor arrays, weapon emplacements, and began to pulse with bright blue energy. Alarms blared across the command deck as systems began to fail ship by ship. The relentless subjugation reports complete power failure. Called out the communications officer. The inevitable victory and glorious conquest as well. Life support holding on backup power, but all offensive and propulsion systems offline. Razak watched in horror as 3 of his most powerful dreadnoughts drifted helplessly, their lights flickering and dying. What's happening to them? Some kind of targeted electromagnetic pulse, Jex reported, scanning the incoming data. But far more sophisticated than anything in our records. It's not just overloading systems, it's rewriting command protocols, turning our own technology against us. The sensor officer's voice rose in panic. Second wave approaching. 500 more drones launching from the surface. Razak's mind raced. Half his fleet disabled in minutes, without a single shot fired. Conventional tactics were useless against an enemy that could phase through energy weapons and disable starships with a touch. All remaining ships, maximum distance from the planet. He ordered, "Recall fighters immediately. Prepare for emergency quantum jump." The order was unprecedented, a retreat without engagement, a surrender of the battlefield without a true shot fired in anger. No Supreme Commander in Vorsian history had ever given such a command. As if sensing his thoughts, Commander Price's face appeared on the view screen once more. This time she wasn't smiling. "Going somewhere, Supreme Commander?" she asked. "But we've only just begun our demonstration. You still have 21 hours left in your ultimatum. Surely the mighty Vorsian Empire isn't retreating after a mere 3 hours?" Razak's scales flushed with humiliation and rage. "What are these weapons? No human technology could possibly." "You're absolutely right," Price interrupted. 3 years ago, we didn't have this technology. Then your empire annihilated the peaceful settlement on New Anchorage. There were children there, Commander. Human children. For the first time, Razak saw genuine emotion on the human's face, a cold, focused anger that made his spine ridges flatten involuntarily. "Since that day," Price continued, "we've devoted every resource to understanding and surpassing Vorsian military technology. What you're witnessing isn't just human ingenuity, it's human vengeance. Carefully measured and precisely delivered." Behind her, Razak could see displays showing every Vorsian ship, their vulnerabilities highlighted, targeting solutions already plotted. "The drones currently attached to your vessels could have easily breached the hulls and killed everyone inside," Price said. "Instead, they only disabled your offensive capabilities. That was a choice, Commander. My choice. Remember that." As the transmission ended, Razak stood frozen, watching as more of his fleet's indicators turned from battle-ready green to disabled red. His entire career he had been taught that humans were technologically inferior, tactically predictable, and martially weak. In 3 hours, Commander Eleanor Price had shattered those assumptions entirely. "All functional vessels. Implement emergency protocol Sigma-9. Razak's voice carried an edge that none of his crew had ever heard before, not anger, but something far more disturbing from a Supreme Commander: fear. Formation scatter. Random jump coordinates. Every ship for itself. Around the inevitable conquest, the remaining operational Vorsian vessels began breaking formation, their engines flaring, as they attempted to put distance between themselves and the swarms of human drones. The once proud Imperial formation, designed to project overwhelming power and perfect coordination, had devolved into a desperate scramble for survival. "Supreme Commander," Jex said quietly, approaching Razak's command throne, "the unflinching Dominance is requesting confirmation of retreat orders. Captain Threx wishes to remind you that retreat without Imperial authorization is punishable by. Tell Threx he can lodge his complaint with my corpse if we don't get out of this system immediately." Razak snarled, his scales cycling through stress patterns. "Execute emergency jump as soon as calculations are complete." The navigation officer worked frantically. "Sir, the jump calculations are being interfered with. Something is disrupting our quantum navigational array. Override it. Manual calculations if necessary." "That would require at least 30 minutes, sir, and without proper safety protocols." Another transmission cut through the chaos. Commander Price appeared on screen, now standing in what was clearly a far more extensive command center than what she had previously shown. Behind her, dozens of human officers monitored holographic displays tracking every Vorsian vessel. "Leaving so soon, Supreme Commander?" Price asked, her tone almost conversational. "We haven't even revealed our main defensive systems yet." "What do you want, human?" Razak demanded, abandoning all pretense of diplomatic protocol. Price leaned forward slightly. "I want you to deliver a message to your Emperor." "The message is this: we knew you were coming 5 days ago." A stunned silence fell across the Vorsian command deck. "Impossible," Razak whispered. "Your fleet's quantum signature was detected by our deep space monitoring network the moment you entered this sector," Price continued. We've been tracking your approach vector, scanning your weapon systems, and analyzing your tactical algorithms ever since. The 24 hours wasn't a courtesy, Commander Razak. It was a trap. We needed time to let you position your fleet exactly where we wanted it. As if to emphasize her point, the tactical display lit up with new alerts. Jump points, the specialized areas of space where quantum travel was most stable, began disappearing from their navigational charts one by one. Quantum inhibitor fields, explained Price. Another technology we've been developing. They're temporarily destabilizing the fabric of space-time around the standard jump coordinates. Your navigation officer is about to inform you that conventional jump points are no longer accessible. On cue, the navigation officer turned to Razak, panic evident in her voice. Sir, all standard jump coordinates are showing as hazardous. We can't safely execute a quantum jump from any calculated position. Razak stared at the human commander, a terrible realization dawning. You've trapped us here. Not permanently, Price replied, just long enough to make our point. But I'm afraid there's one more surprise we need to demonstrate. She nodded to someone off-screen, and the tactical display updated with new contacts, dozens of them, emerging from behind Helios 7's moon. Reinforcements? Razak asked, his voice hollow. Oh no, Commander. Those have been there all along. Our actual reinforcements will be arriving in approximately 17 minutes. Jex Naroon studied the tactical display with professional dismay. Sir, we're detecting at least 27 additional human vessels, a capital ship class. They've been concealed behind the moon, powered down to avoid detection. The supposedly lone outpost now had a fleet nearly twice the size of Razak's original force, and his remaining operational ships were down to just 7. You never needed 24 hours, Razak said, the truth finally clear. This was all. A demonstration, Price finished for him. The Vorsian Empire needed to understand exactly what happens when you push humans too far. We could have destroyed your fleet the moment you entered the system. Instead, we chose to educate you. She leaned closer to the camera, her voice dropping to a steely tone. The jump points will stabilize in exactly 1 hour. Until then, you're free to observe as our reinforcements arrive. I suggest you use that time to compose your report to your Emperor. Explain to him why the Helios sector is now officially off-limits to the Vorsian Empire. The transmission ended, leaving Razak staring at the tactical display as more and more human ships emerged from concealment, a fighting force that had been meticulously hidden until this precise moment. Orders, Supreme Commander? Asked Jex quietly. Razak slumped in his command throne. Maintain position. All remaining ships, power down non-essential systems. No provocative actions. He paused, then added the words no Vorsian commander had spoken in generations, prepare to negotiate terms. Around the flagship, the once mighty 16th Imperial battle fleet drifted in disarray, a scattered, broken force that had never even fired a shot in its own defense. All this, just 3 hours after giving the humans time to prepare. Supreme Commander Razak Tull stood alone on the observation deck of the inevitable conquest, watching as the remains of his once proud fleet limped toward the jump point. The humiliation was complete. 7 damaged ships out of 16, returning with nothing to show but a harsh lesson in human capabilities. The intelligence reports were wrong, he muttered to himself, his scales a dull gray of defeat. So catastrophically wrong. The door hissed open behind him as Jex Naroon entered, carrying a data tablet. Always dutiful, even in disaster. The humans have transmitted their terms, Supreme Commander, Jex said quietly. Razak didn't turn around. Let me guess. Unconditional surrender. Reparations? Perhaps they demand the head of the Supreme Commander who so brilliantly led his fleet into their trap. Actually, no, Jex replied, sounding puzzled. They're remarkably reasonable. A formal recognition of human territorial sovereignty in the Helios sector. Non-aggression pact with defined boundaries. cultural and scientific exchange programs. Now Razak did turn, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence with surprise. That's it? No demands for our technology? No territorial concessions beyond this sector? Commander Price included a personal message for you, Jex said, handing over the tablet. The screen displayed the human commander's face, now bearing an expression Razak couldn't quite interpret. Supreme Commander Razak. She began, contrary to what you might believe. Humans don't desire empire. We simply want to be left alone to develop in our own way. Today wasn't about humiliating the Vorsian Empire, it was about establishing mutual respect. You now understand what we're capable of when threatened. We hope this understanding will be the foundation for peace, rather than further conflict. Safe journey home, Commander. Razak stared at the screen long after the message ended. In the entire history of Vorsian conquest, no species had ever defeated an imperial fleet and then offered terms that weren't punitive. They're incomprehensible, he said finally. Given the tactical advantage, any rational species would press it to maximum benefit. Perhaps that's why we underestimated them so severely, Jex suggested. We assumed they would behave as we would. Razak set down the tablet with a bitter laugh. The eternal mistake in war, assuming your enemy thinks as you do. He gestured toward the viewport where the ambush had played out. We granted them 24 hours to prepare, assuming they would cower or futilely build defenses. Instead, they had prepared days in advance and simply used our arrogance against us. What will you tell the Emperor? Jex asked cautiously. Razak's scales shifted through several colors before settling on a resigned blue-gray. The truth, I suppose. That I've discovered the most dangerous species we've ever encountered, not because their technology is superior, which it apparently is, but because they don't follow any predictable pattern of behavior. When given time to surrender, they attack. When given the opportunity to destroy an enemy, they offer peace. He turned to face his oldest friend fully. And do you know the worst part, Jex? I'll have to explain to His Eternal Magnificence that not a single Vorsian warrior died gloriously in battle today. Instead, 16 Imperial warships were thoroughly defeated by a human female who apparently prepared for our arrival by scheduling it in her calendar. For the first time in their long association, Jex Naroon allowed himself a small laugh. Perhaps we should be grateful, sir. In the annals of Vorsian military disasters, at least this one came with remarkably favorable terms. As the jump point finally stabilized ahead, Supreme Commander Razak Tull pondered the strangest lesson of his military career. Sometimes, the most fearsome enemy isn't the one who fights like you expect, it's the one who refuses to fight the way you understand at all.